Mr.
I call
Speaker.
the Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr. Speaker, this afternoon I sat through the 30th budget that it's been my privilege to hear presented in this House. And there have been a range of budgets over the years. I think that in terms of my involvement, there are two budgets which stand out. The first was the 2006 budget delivered by the Honourable Sir Michael Cullen. That stands out because it introduced the concept of KiwiSaver, the long-term national savings scheme, and in many senses put an end to what had been 3 very ugly decades of debate on the superannuation issue. The second budget that stands out is the budget presented earlier this afternoon by the current Minister of Finance for an entirely different set of reasons. Unlike Sir Roger Douglas's great rescue budget of 1984, which had to deal with the excesses of Muldoonism, in other words, the internally generated problems in having the most regulated economy at that time outside the communist world, today's budget deals with positioning New Zealand for the future in the context of an international situation that has been far from certain in recent years. We have been through, as the Minister pointed out in his speech, the greatest international economic crisis since the Great Depression. And if that's not bad enough, if that's not something none of us had any direct experience of previously, add to that the greatest natural disaster the country has ever seen, and in terms of cost, one of the greatest natural disasters the world has ever seen, in the form of the Christchurch earthquakes, and the government's problems compound dramatically. But it doesn't stop there, Mr. Speaker. We have just been through a summer of enormous drought, expected to make a significant impact on GDP and on our economy. So when you put all those factors together, I think it's a remarkable achievement that today in the budget we see the Minister of Finance project with confidence a return to a budget surplus of modest proportions in the next financial year, but considerably stronger in the out years from there. And when one bears in mind, sir, all of those upheavals and the fact that that is a process of change is occurring in just 5 years, that is a remarkable transformation for this economy. And for those who say that we haven't seen the benefits, in a funny sort of way, I think part of the problem is because we never got to the pits of despair. We never saw the depth of recession in New Zealand that we're seeing in France at the moment, that we've seen in Cyprus, that we've seen right through Europe. We never got to the depths of despair that we're now starting to see even in Australia earlier this week, where a strong projected budget surplus has suddenly amounted in election year to a massive government deficit. So, Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders, through prudent management over the last 5 years, have been insulated from the worst of those economic impacts. While unemployment has moved upwards and is still unacceptably high, it's about half what it was projected to be. It's about a third of what it is in most other countries of our type the world over. We are still, nonetheless, now well positioned for the challenges that lie ahead. And I think they contain some opportunities and some risks. Let me deal with the risks first, Mr. Speaker. We heard in the speech of the Leader of the Opposition this afternoon, I might say one of the weakest opposition leaders' speeches I've heard in recent times, but be that as it may, we heard what was essentially an ideological prescription, such as it was, for the nation's cures. Higher taxes, picking on certain groups of the population, setting them against each other, the politics of envy returning. I have to say, with the greatest of respect to my colleague to my left, there were overtones from a different perspective of an ideological approach in his remarks just a few moments ago. The reality is, sir, that we actually live in a post-ideological age, and that there needs to be a level of pragmatism and studied care in terms of the management of economies and the transitions out of the situations we've seen New Zealand in recent years and moving forward. And there are some lessons to be learned which I think the government is learning, and I acknowledge the work of the Minister for Earthquake Recovery and the Minister of Finance in particular, in terms of what's going on in Christchurch. Because when those events occurred, the rule book went out the window in terms of how you recover, how you restore, in that case, an economy, a regional economy. There was no guiding set of principles. There was no ready or reference book to go to. The government had to act pragmatically as the circumstances dictated. And a lot of things happened that were completely foreign to the way in which public services were delivered previously. The challenge now as we move forward is to capture those good innovations and use them in terms of the way in which we manage the public sector of the New Zealand economy as a whole. It's not about that old competition for resources as much. It's about the smarter use of the resources that are available. And I think one of the themes in this budget is very strongly about the smarter and better use of available resources rather than that constant David Copperfield-like clamour for more and more and more. Mr. Speaker, the next thing that I want to say in respect of that change is that the initiatives announced this afternoon with regard to housing, I think, are a superb example of that approach at work. We all know and have known for too long that the proud state housing system that's really part of the New Zealand national tapestry is creaking, that we have people who are trapped in those houses, people who can't get access to state accommodation when they need it, and this peculiar notion that's been allowed to build up that the houses that people were occupying were effectively theirs for life even when their circumstances had moved on. The changes that this budget foreshadows will make it easier for people to transition to different types of accommodation, more suited to their needs at particular points in their lives, and also make it easier then for the people who might need the 3- and 4-bedroom homes at an earlier stage to have access to them. And I acknowledge the work that the Minister of Housing has done in this sense. I think it's smart, I think it's innovative, I think it's working within the system to achieve positive gains, better use of the assets, better rewards for the people that we serve, and fundamentally a more pragmatic approach overall. Equally with the decisions that we'll make a little later in this sitting with regard to the housing permits concept, again, dealing with a problem that we all know successive governments have struggled with, this government is achieving cut-through. So, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the budget, you can play the traditional political game, if you like, and sort of do the unders and overs and say it's not fair, this sector hasn't gained as much as that. But I think those days are past. I think what people look at now, whether it be the public sector, the non-government sector or the private sector, is who is best placed to deliver services, to deliver the things that people want, and how do we work with them to facilitate those opportunities. So, for example, in the health sector, and I'll give the House 2 examples with which I'm directly involved, we launched a new mental health plan at the end of last year. For the first time, we will be actively engaging with the 300-odd NGOs in the mental health sector to make sure that they can be part of the solution, not constantly left to one side as advocates for something better. Shortly, we will announce a new suicide prevention action plan. And again, that same principle will apply. It's not about a clamour for more resources. It's about saying, how can we much more smartly and intelligently use what we have to advantage to serve the people well? Mr. Speaker, I almost seem I should be in need of the health system. But that's the time of year. Can I simply conclude by saying this is a pragmatic, sensible, well-shaped budget, one adequate for the times.
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this debate be now adjourned.